I will. All right, welcome everyone. In our Sitecore user group Columbus May meetup, we are very fortunate today to have Sebastian Winter talking about Sitecore Content Hub. Sebastian was Sitecore MVP before, former Sitecore MVP. He is and was a Sitecore enthusiast and close to the community. He now works in Sitecore, and I think you work for the developer experience and developer advocate. And thanks for taking the invitation to talk about Content Hub today, Sebastian. All right, floor is yours.
Okay.
Take over.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me. So let me share my screen to get things started. Maybe you can give me a quick sign if that worked.
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. Just need to write. So yeah, welcome to this session. I would like to share with you how we implement large Content Hub solutions at Sitecore using Visual Studio. And this was already presented on SACCON Europe this year before. And I apologize for not having the time to change the slide deck appearance. Well, one thing I can offer, I can fix it like that. Let's see. Right, but that's yeah, that's all I could get. So my name is Sebastian, already mentioned. You might know me from some community work around SXA in particular. I started implementing Sitecore XP solutions in 2014 on client side, and 2019 I joined Sitecore as a solution architect. Now I'm a developer advocate, as already introduced, and I'm working within the tech marketing team. Sadly, so this presentation was held by my colleague Leandro and me. So sadly, he couldn't make it today. I asked him, but yeah, I hope I can cover his part as good as he can. So let's see. So end of 2020, I got introduced to a Content Hub project, and you probably know that Content Hub is a SaaS product. I asked Himadri before, and he said the people that are joining know things about Content Hub already. So, so I'm sure you know that at least. And but maybe you have not heard that Content Hub was not always a SaaS product. So we used to have it more in a PaaS model, which means we were developing the whole solution yeah, from on top of something and deployed everything together, basically. So when we were on the PaaS model, we had a very structured approach on working on that solution in Visual Studio, basically, like you know it with XP or XM solutions. So when we moved to SaaS, we kind of lost that. And so we needed to come up with a new approach that developers can still work as they are used to, as well as have it in a way that it's enterprise ready. So the project that I was working on with Leandro was an upgrade project where we migrated from a PaaS solution to SaaS. So from whatever Content Hub was before to what Content Hub is now. And that meant that we needed to change the approach that we were working with handling, for example, the scripts and migrating all the code base that we had before into the SaaS solution. So by the time we were deploying the full solution before, which meant we were deploying our solution on top of the product, as you know it maybe also from XP and XM, right? So you have a vanilla product which is delivered by Sitecore, and you develop on top of that and deploy everything together. So we couldn't say, well, we could not say that we should, but by the time we were able to change a lot of the behavior of the product, because and creating DLLs that override some of the core functionality. Basically, we owned the whole deployment pipeline, so yeah, we were in control of everything. Then we changed to SaaS, where we are mainly using scripts as an extension point that the product provides. So this can be debatable because we did lose some of the agility the product provided, but it also at the same point or at the same time removed some of the responsibility and complexity deploying the whole solution. So you have to imagine you're building on top of a black box, let's say, that is provided to you. It's more comfortable, but it also has a bit more limitations.
Hello.
Now, coming to that, all the code we had before on the PaaS solution, we cannot just port it out, which means there is a code base that we need to change. And going from PaaS to SaaS, there is no code that you can just copy paste. You need to migrate all of the code and basically redo that. So yeah, we had to come up with a migration path, which when I started, the original code was already reviewed and split into chunks, like tasks in Jira, and to understand what, to basically understand what needs to go where in the SaaS solution. So in the PaaS world, we had command handlers, which was the way we reacted on changes in Content Hub. Basically, whenever an event was fired, we could launch a command handler to do whatever was needed with the entity or the data. And this we need to transfer or needed to transfer into scripts. We did communicate with external systems, which logic we needed to transfer into Azure functions, and also some cron jobs and timer triggered functions existed on Content Hub, and we shifted that into Azure functions as well. There was also some front-end changes in the authoring UI that we could do in the Content Hub version on PaaS, which we basically transferred into external page components. However, this presentation is primarily focused on backend development, so we will not cover external page components here. Yeah, and of course, we had to think about deployments. So how do we shift all the changes between environments? And usually in the SaaS world, that goes with the import-export tool. Whereas before we had a system of patches we applied to the system. So as the majority of work was scripting, yeah, Content Hub provides a simple solution to write and build scripts with an online editor. So that's fine. However, copy pasting code from your IDE into the online editor or directly coding inline is not very convenient, and at least it's not really on an enterprise level. So yeah, saying that again, the tool is nice, but you cannot develop like with a whole team doing it like that. So we wanted to work in our own environment, basically. So we needed to fulfill the same requirements that we had before as developers. And so we want to debug our scripts, right? So we want to test our scripts with unit testing as well as regression testing. And I will present that later in a short demo. We needed to be able to push and build our scripts from our IDE into a sandbox environment and not just copy pasting everything into the online editor. We also wanted to organize our sources and persist everything in a repo, just a general developer requirement, I would say. And of course, we wanted to be supported by IntelliSense. Especially, I was new to the whole project, so looking everything up in the documentation would have been quite of a pain, and using IntelliSense always gives you some idea on what you can do with certain classes or methods and what to do next. So yeah. So now I have a question to you. So if you would like, because this is an online meeting, so I thought how to ask you and get the results. So I thought about using Menti. So what you could do if you want to join, you can scan this QR code or just go on menti.com and provide that code that's here, like the 46481448, and then you should be on the on this little survey. So my first question is around how many of you have actually a Sitecore XP XM developer background? I think it should be there already. Let me check.
Yes, yeah, it came up for me.
Right, if you so here on top it still says like if it was too fast, how to join that. Right, so I think that's quite expected, that most of us are coming from an XP XM background, maybe not always from a development background, but I think the Sitecore community was grown on XP and XM, and all the Content Hub projects in the past were developed in-house by Stylabs, basically, the former company, and is opened up now to the partner ecosystem. And I think that's why we also run into those questions like, how do we handle code on an enterprise level? How can we develop conveniently? So my next question is, how many of you have been involved into a Content Hub project so far? So on your phone, the question should have changed now, and you might be able to answer that.
So I answered, but I don't know. It's asking me to sign in.
You need to sign in for Menti?
That's what it said. Next
Okay.
screen. I think it took my response, but then it was asking me to sign in.
Okay. Okay, but at least it looks like you have either already experience on Content Hub or you plan to go on a project, which I hope this session will be valuable for you to have a better developer experience. Right. So yeah, thanks for letting me know, and going back to the presentation. Now, for those of you who are new to Content Hub, I would like to go a little bit to explain what Content Hub is in a nutshell, and not too deep, but like having a basic understanding of that. So in general, Content Hub is a piece of SaaS software which provides several use cases. So most prominent, I would say, there's the DAM system, there is a MRM system involved, there is a content management system involved. However, all is based basically on a data schema. And as you said, most of you are coming from an XP and XM background. Most of us went through the developer training, and I would say on slide 1, it was mentioned that everything in Sitecore is an item, right? So in content, and items are basically structured or defined through templates, so all of the fields that are available in an item to hold the data, and all the field types basically are defined in a template. Now, Content Hub is not so much different from that approach. So under the hood, you could say, well, at least nearly everything is an entity. Instead of an item, we call things entities in Content Hub. And an entity is defined through a schema. So a schema then, as an equivalent to a template, defines the data structure and what field and field types are provided for an entity, so that you can put data. So in order to make the life for marketers easier, we can automate things in Content Hub, doing, for example, data enhancements or data automations, basically, so that marketers do not have to enter data manually, but they get that provided automatically from information that we have somewhere else, and we pull things together and fill in fields from the entity, basically, right? So for that, you would define a trigger, and a trigger fires on a particular event and executes an action. So for example, if we upload an asset, so an asset would be an entity, it's the most prominent one that you have in the DAM system. So an asset holds all the information that an uploaded file or an uploaded asset basically needs to have. So on the one hand, the file itself, the file name, maybe some additional metadata about the file. So if we upload such an asset to Content Hub, we could have a trigger that fires on the event of creation of the asset and then executes basically an action. And this kind of action can then call either a piece of custom code, which would be an action script, or it could also call any HTTP request to either fire on an Azure function or to connect to any third-party system. So a script can be executed either before or after the commit. So that's what we call pre or post commit. We will talk about that in the demo a little bit in more depth. So the example that I want to show you in the demo is about an asset. I told you already what an asset is. So it's basically an entity with certain fields. And what I want to do is whenever I upload an asset, I want to set the field asset type automatically. So asset type is also an entity. Being more precise, it's a taxonomy, but I've created already values for this taxonomy. So I created document, image, video, and generic. Generic is just for everything that's not one of the other three. So whenever I upload an asset or a file basically and say it has an ending like a file ending like JPEG, then the asset type image is assigned to it. So nobody has to do that manually, right? So a very, very simple use case, but I think it showcases what you could do and then take it from there. So let's go into the demo. I hope that's not too small on my Visual Studio solution here. So let me walk you through the script first. So I have created, I can zoom in a bit. I have created just in this case, it was for Sucon. That's why I called it Sucon sample script. And let's go through it a little bit. So what we have in there is we have a run method. And the very first thing that we do is we take the context and get the target entity from the context. So the target entity would be the asset that we upload. And with this target entity that we get from the context, we can access basically every field that's already filled or that is accessible from our target entity. Now then we have a few constants. Let's jump over that. And our business logic starts here where we are validating if the target entity is actually the expected entity or of the expected entity type. So in our case, we want to make sure that we only run the script for assets. Well, we can set this also in Content Hub directly, but I think it makes also sense and more secure if we directly set it in the script itself. So whenever we have an asset that's not an entity and our script is accidentally run, it will exit here directly. Now our, let's call it business logic is, well, we get the file name from the file name property of our target entity and then derive the file extension from it. Then we do a simple mapping of potential file extensions that I've configured so far and see if that maps, and then assign the or get basically the asset type ID that we want to assign later on. So we do a mapping here basically of file extension and asset type. And at the end, and that's basically what we want to do. So in order to set this kind of relation between our asset and the asset type, we have to get the relation first and then set the ID on that relation field, basically. Now, one more thing we are doing here. So there is, we are checking the execution phase, as I told you. So there is, you can run your script pre-commit or post-commit. So that means, like, when you upload an asset, the data for the asset is already saved when you run it post-commit. So you have to take care yourself to save your changes that you apply on your script. Or if you run it pre-commit, then the asset that's being uploaded will be saved along with the action of uploading the asset. So your changes are applied along with that process. Now, what you will see in here, just to say, we have already some IntelliSense, right? So if I go like that, so that's what I meant. So we can just work as we're used to in Visual Studio and have our place to be, basically. So let's take a look at the test that I've created. So I have created for my script a Sukun sample script test. And if we go through that just quickly, we're giving in the file extension and the asset type that we are expecting, so that we can compare at the end if our script did what it should do. And within the script, we are creating a mock context. And this mock context is basically there to pretend that there is, or to provide the right asset to the script that we are running. So what we're doing in here is we are creating an asset and then assigning the mandatory fields. In that case, we are assigning the title to our asset. And then for our test in particular, we need the file name as well. So that's why we are setting the file name just with a generated name containing the file extension. Then we're setting up the mock context to ensure that when we want to read the target entity, as I showed you in the script on the very top, right? So when we want to read the target entity, that needs to be returned from our test. So that's why we are mocking that. We are also returning the target ID. However, as we are running that in a execution phase pre-commit, there will be no target ID, and we are using it not on the script, so that's why everything is fine. But in general, if that would be a script that runs post-commit, there would have been already a target ID of the entity, and we could load it using that. Then we basically run the script, and at the end, we want to know, by getting the asset type to asset relation, we want to know if our asset that we've created actually has that asset type, right? So that's the whole test. So we assert if the expected file type identifier or the asset type basically matches the asset type that we get from the asset itself after running the script. And if that is fine, then we're good to go. So let's quickly run those tests. And this time it should be better. Not sure if you probably didn't attend the talk on the Sukun, but those tests failed because I wasn't on Wi-Fi. That was not the best experience. However, now it works fine, everything is green. So the process would be now to actually push my script to my Content Hub sandbox environment. So therefore I used the command line project, and I'm running it by starting a new instance. And it opens up on the wrong screen. There we go. So that would be the process that we have as developers. Like we develop locally, we test locally against our sandbox environment, and then we push everything to our sandbox environment. Now, okay, so we got an error. What does the error say? It says that we're using a prohibited attribute. So the system IO path get extension, and yeah, that's right, we're using that. So what I want to say here, so that was an intended error, and what I want to say is that even though your test passed you have to be careful because scripts you cannot use everything and every library basically in your script. You can only use what Content Hub provides. So obviously system.io path is nothing that Content Hub provides internally. So that's why we can't use that. So let's close that and go to the line which was claimed being wrong. So that's this one. So yeah, we're using the get extension method. Let's take this off, and I have created my own method to extract the file extension basically. So let's run the tests. It should be green as well. Right, so there we go. Let's try to push it again. Debug, start new instance. Okay, wrong screen. There we go. So it says that there are unpublished changes. So let's see if that's fine and passes the build now. Right, so seems everything fine. If you compare that experience to what you would have if you copy paste that into the online editor and click the build button, never get a response, so you have to reload basically the page. Well, I like that more than it was on before. So let's have a look on Content Hub itself. So let's see what we got. Let's first look to the scripts. So we have a subcon sample script, which was just created. And yeah, you can see there is my script. Basically, it has been built. Not sure if I see that somewhere. Anyway, if I go back, along with that, there was an action created for me as well. So if I go to the actions, you will see that there is the subcon sample script action here. So let's have a look at this one. So this action is, so that was automatically created for me, right? So I didn't have to do that. And it directly created an action of the type action script. There are more types that could be there, but in our case, we have an action script and assigned directly my script to that action. Great. So the last thing we would have to do, which I prepared already, could have done also in this presentation, is we have to go into the triggers. So if you remember one of the slides, we have to trigger the action to run our custom code, basically our script. So there is this trigger that I created up front, and it is already wired up a bit with my action. So what you see here in the trigger is, of course, it has a name that I just gave. The objective is to run on entity creation, which means when I upload an asset, then this trigger will fire, and it's running in process. So there are two execution types. There is in process, which has the pre-commit and post-commit option, and there is the background script. Now the in process script runs, yeah, as it says, in process. So that means basically a user have to wait for what is being done on the script before it's actually returning. If you run it in background, then this is kind of asynchronous. So yeah, everything will be done. What needs to be done on entity creation, and then at a certain point of time, this will be whatever this script does, like sorry, like the background script, that will be applied later on. In the condition, we see that well, we want to have this run only on entity types like assets or the m.asset, and we check that the file name property is not empty. Otherwise, our script doesn't make sense. So kind of what we do in the script as well, but yeah, just double checking it. Last but not least, you see that I have configured it as a pre-commit script or pre-commit action and running the subcon sample script. let's see if that actually works. So let's go and create an asset. There we go. So let's upload a file and have that logo. Right, there we go. So here you can see that the thumbnail, for example, is not yet shown. And the reason is probably that that's done asynchronously in background. So if I would wait like a few seconds and refresh the page, it will appear. And maybe it appears now already while I was talking over it. Let's see. No, not yet. But what you could see is that the asset type has been set to image as I uploaded a JPEG file, which was the logo of the Sitecore user group Columbus. Yeah, it has detected based on the file extension that this is an image and assigned it automatically. As I said, very, very simple use case, but just to show how that works. Okay, yeah, going back to the presentation. So I have to admit, not all of the solution was created by Leandro or me. Thanks to Mikola, who created the script pusher, basically. So the thing that pushes the scripts from your IDE, so from Visual Studio, into your Content Hub sandbox environment. So yeah, thanks for that. And definitely worth a mention. Our solution is not the only way on how to work with Content Hub as a developer. So at Sitecore, we have a dedicated team that cares for the developer experience along, and what they are creating is basically a CLI, so command line interface. And don't worry. So if it's completely up to you if you want to use the solution that I'm currently presenting, or if you want to use a more CLI-based way. However, if you start already with the Visual Studio solution, you can always migrate your things over to work with whatever Sitecore officially gives. Currently, the official solution is not yet up to date with all the features that we can provide with the Visual Studio solution. That was also the reason why we implemented that. However, we are in close contact with the DevX team at Sitecore, and they are ramping up with the features. So yeah, I'm not a product manager, so don't ask me for due dates or anything like that. I'm not the person to commit on that, but I know that the CLI will be heavily enhanced with the next releases of Content Hub. So whenever you want to follow the change log or have a look in the documentation, feel free to do so. So there you find already what the CLI is capable of. Right, coming back to the solution and having a deeper look what we have done. Now, there has been, maybe you followed this one, there has been a heavy discussion on while this user group was promoted, that I will present something about providing Helix for Content Hub. And there has been some discussions around that. I would say, don't worry, I will not provide Helix. However, we made up our thoughts when creating that kind of solution that we are offering here. Well, what we have here is definitely a layered approach, and we have instead of foundation, we have, for example, a base layer, which is like a project that handles the base of everything, and then we have the implementation layer, or yeah, let's say we have a layered approach. Within that, we will go into the solution one more time to explain or elaborate a little bit more on that. But what we wouldn't do, because our coding footprint is much smaller than you would have it on a deployed solution like XP or XM or whatever Content Hub was before. So it doesn't make sense to go with the overhead of creating project for each feature. So that's why we decided for having it in a much more lightweight approach. And again, this is nothing that is supported officially by Sitecore. That's just what we came up with from the by that time from the professional services team to basically serve our clients and do our work basically. So yeah. So we have our Visual Studio projects as shown here, but yeah, let's maybe directly go into the solution and walk through that. So let's just collapse and go one by one. So starting from the top, we have the base project, and that's basically yeah, that's the basis for everything. So the base project is a very technical focused project. You will see we have a feature folder here containing the features, but as you can see, they are very base features that directly connect with Content Hub and is on the Content Hub layer. So basically the base project abstracts everything that comes from the Content Hub SDK, and all the other projects will work on what gets provided by the base layer. So you can see we have some CRUD operations defined here. We have logging defined here. We have some SDK access defined here and security and all of that. So that's what you would find in the base project. Now, the next one, let's go for the implementation project. So that would be your feature base that you share across basically across your solution. So in our case, we don't have any features registered yet. However, we have, as we heavily working with dependency injection, we have defined a sample service, so you could build your own services based on that sample service, just to have an idea how we intended to build those. What else do we have? Right, we have base command line. So base command line is basically an extension to the CLI. So that goes with every kind of mass operation that you want to do with your Content Hub environment. However, that's not connected to the developer experience CLI that's offered. So that's just separate. There is also the implementation command line. That could be something, again, we haven't provided something here beside a sample structure, but that could be something where you apply some customer related logic that you want to run. And yeah, I would say our main executables are here the Azure functions and the scripts. However, we don't deal much with Azure functions in this presentation, but we also, as you can see, we have some samples provided, and the idea is that you, and that's what we do also in our enterprise projects running with our clients. We want to have all sources, may it be Azure functions or scripts or anything else. We all want to have things together in one solution, and that's why we have it basically like that. So we have samples for HTTP triggers or timer-based triggers, and they rely on some base triggers that we've defined within the same project. Last but not least, the scripts. Now, this structure is a little bit different. Even though we have a feature folder, you can see that we follow a folder structure that defines the action, actions type. So there can be an action script, there can be a metadata script, there can be shared scripts. In our case, or the one I showed you, that's an action script. So we structure that further than within here, having then a feature folder. In this case, I named it SUCON, and then providing either folders for in-process scripts or background scripts. Now, the reason is that the script pusher relies on that structure, and we haven't changed that so far. So it's basically hard-coded. However, you can easily extend that. So whenever Content Hub is providing a new action type, then you could just add another folder here and then adjust the script pusher functionality to also watch this folder basically. Right. Yeah, that's basically it. Let me go back to the slides. So if you want to get started, you need yeah, basically it makes sense to have a Content Hub environment, ideally something like a sandbox. You could also work directly with any kind of environment, even though that would not be recommended, because if you run unit test, the unit test would create assets for testing purposes, even though you can delete them in the test directly. You don't want to mess up your production environment or anything like that, right? So what you need to do then is you can clone that, and this already spoiler alert, but you can clone our GitHub repo as some kind of example, or yeah, I wouldn't call it starter kit, but yeah, take it as an example. When you create a user and then an OAuth client to connect basically your solution with your sandbox environment, yeah, you can interact with all the features that we provide in that Visual Studio solution. The only thing that you have to do, maybe point five was missing, is here. You have to provide those projects, and that's the test project, the command line project, and the Azure Functions project. So all of those require the connection to your Content Hub sandbox. So that's why you would have to create a local settings.json file in there, or use the user secrets to connect your environment. Yeah, having said that, right, so this is open source. It's out on GitHub since the Sitecore User Group Conference, and yeah, you can check it out. You can play around with that, and we do accept pull requests. So if you find something that you want to have improved, just feel free to improve it. That's community driven. Again, it's nothing official. It's more coming from us personally, I would say. On that repo, you find also a more detailed getting started guide, like more detailed than what I showed you on the slide before. And yeah, I hope it helps you. And by having said that, that's basically all I wanted to show from my side. I hope this presentation was valuable for you. And yeah, I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. That was an awesome presentation. So I have a question, but I will let the group here to give the opportunity if anyone else has question. As a host, I can go last. So if you have a question, please ask that to Sebastian.
Don't be shy.
Okay, maybe I should start. Maybe someone will think of something. So the unit test that you showed there, it's actually, you mentioned that you didn't have the Wi-Fi connection, and that's because it failed because it was not able to connect to Content Hub. Right, and then so you are pushing this script, right? So in the unit test, actually, sorry if I didn't follow properly. What was exactly happening? Why you need to have the Content Hub connection? Usually unit test, you will kind of mock things, right? And not try to have a real connection with the system. So what is that, why that was a problem?
Okay, so let's maybe go back to the script. I believe you can mock things. I wonder to what extent you can do that. So this script is definitely so when I'm creating this asset here, it's creating it on the sandbox environment, even though, well, no, in my case, it's not being deleted. So we might find that asset even later in the asset list. You probably can mock that. However, your script, yeah, okay, yeah. So I was just wondering that your script is running against the environment. However, you can mock that as well as we do that here, right? So we are passing to the script anyway mocked asset, even though our script connects to Content Hub to retrieve the asset type. So I think it might be definitely much more effort to do so, even though you would be more independent. One thing connected to what I was showing, the error that I was showing, is that you anyway have a gap between what you do on your local and what's happening in Content Hub. So as you've seen, right, all the tests were green in my environment, even though they failed on the build because I used something that's not available in Content Hub. And
Right.
there could be edge cases also on when you create, for example, an asset or any other kind of entity, then some fields might be populated later on because other scripts are running and you don't have them available. So those cases could anyway happen to you. But yeah, of course, if you mock everything, then it would be fine. I can
Yeah,
just
I'm not
say that
like, you know,
we're testing it like that against our sandbox environment.
yeah, I am not specifically trying to say that we have to be purist about unit testing. It's actually the scenario that you showed that unit testing is successful, but actual, like, you know, code execution failed later, which is, I kind of think, is part of the integration testing, because you are really integrating with the real environment. So the other question that I have is, like, you know, if I could follow that properly, you use path, and path is specifically associated with a file system in the operating system, right? Is that the reason why it failed?
Oh, you mean the function, the method?
Right. When you executed the code
This is what
against
I
the,
executed, right?
yeah, so path is actually pointing, probably, if I understand correctly, path is pointing to the local file system to get the asset, or, like, you know, whereas in the Content Hub, there is no local, like, you know, it's in cloud, it's just a asset is uploaded in some place, right?
Could be, but the error message was kind of clear about that system.io path is not available in Content Hub from what I read through the message. And that's a common case. I mean, script development is very, very enclosed. So you can only use what Content Hub provides. You cannot add anything. There is the method of shared scripts. So you can use shared scripts, because what you see in this script also is like all the debugging that we could do in here is all coming from methods that we have defined directly in the script, which means we redefine them each time we write a new script. That's why we have this kind of template being used. So the only thing that you could do is define it in a shared script, which I haven't worked with yet. However, something like system.io would not be, or system.io path would not be available in Content Hub.
Yeah, I think I think I understand that one. I was even going, like, you know, one step further to ask, like, you know, whether system.io even is possible in the Content Hub scenario. Because, like, you know, maybe they didn't include it because it doesn't make sense to include, because it's not a file system. So
yeah,
right.
that's
So
okay. Now, when I created this example for a user group conference, I was just checking the internet on how to extract easily the file extension, and I found that, and I ran into that issue, and I thought, okay, that's even a good showcase to say, well, you cannot use everything if it's not on Content Hub, because also our developments, we constantly run into that, seeing that, yeah, that works, and tests are green, but it doesn't work Content Hub. So that's why you always have to test both, right? Even though you have a coverage with your integration testing, that doesn't mean that it's good to go on Content Hub. So you always have to test it there as well.
So other than the web SDK, JavaScript SDK is also available, right? Is there a possibility that similar can be done with JavaScript SDK? Similar solution?
Haven't tried. So this is entirely based on the web SDK. Yeah, I simply can't tell because I haven't tried. As you see,
Yeah, so I actually worked with JavaScript SDK, but it's not as easy to work. But the documentation says people with JavaScript knowledge, they can use JavaScript SDK because it will be more familiar to them. But I see at least developers I talk to, most of them use actually web SDK because it's so much easier to work with. So
yeah,
okay,
right.
Great. I'm sorry I was talking too much here. Anyone has any question?
So Sebastian, just one question. My name is Kirti Kumar.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
go ahead.
Yeah, so just wanted to check that what are the challenges, or if I say that, what are the sort of things we need to consider before designing a solution?
Well, so what we considered is, I think I mentioned that well, we had basic developer requirements that we wanted to solve, and Content Hub is not solving that for us because what is offered by Content Hub is basically an online editing tool and then an SDK that you can build against. But I was wondering that if everyone starts now building his or her own solution, that's just time consuming, and we have something, and that's why I wanted to offer that. So the challenges I see is well, covering those basic needs on the one hand, and then structuring the code in a way that it's enterprise proof. So the thing that we've created here is not just popping out of our minds and we thought it's cool to have it or nice to have it, but we're actually using it on very large clients. So it has been proven that it's working at least for us, and that's why we are open sourcing it for everyone. So not sure if that goes into the direction your question was aiming at.
Yeah, getting it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you want to consider just as a general approach, and that's why we thought about Helix and how that might apply, or what we want to apply from Helix to that Content Hub solution, was like, how does the solution stay maintainable? And that would be in a way that you encapsulate on the one hand your different features, like Helix does it with even with dedicated projects, so that you have a clear dependencies. And it does it with this layered approach. Now, as I said, the footprint of our application is much smaller, right? So you will create, or I'm not sure if you're already on Content Hub projects, but you will create a lot of scripts, and that's just one file. So it doesn't make sense to create a project for each script, or even bundling scripts like that, at least from my perspective. But I think if you go for, and they are anyway independent, right? They don't refer to anything but what you get from Content Hub. So you don't have to manage dependencies. Azure Functions do, right? So you can provide things that go, or they are more flexible than the scripts. However, you also end up just with a trigger and then maybe a service or anything called being like that. So yeah, I can just say from our own experience that if you go with that structure, it stays quite maintainable and sustainable.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess what happened with Helix is people, it's really a guideline, right? And we should take it as a guideline. Each project is different. not like, just follow it as it is. So,
Right.
yeah. Awesome. Any other question? All right. That was a great presentation, Sebastian.
Thanks.
Thanks for doing this. By the way, I missed your session in Shakkan. I was waiting for the recording video, but this is so much fun, so much better. Well, thank you for the presentation. This video will be actually uploaded in YouTube. And yeah, thanks.
Great. Thanks for having me. And see you hopefully
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.